Welcome back to Wellness in Minutes, where we give you bite-sized health information that's easy to digest.
Plants do amazing things internally and externally. So if you follow the directions, if you get good products, and getting good products means getting recommendations from people who really know what they're talking about, then you can come to very little harm.
That's so beautiful. And it's true. I mean, I've lived and worked in the Pacific now for almost 20 years. And, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to find a kava kava product on a shelf in a pharmacy, right? It was still backwaters. But
Hmm.
now, with the advent of people like yourself and the research that is being done, you can actually get a lot of these plant medicines in our local pharmacies, or even in supermarkets these days,
Right.
so it's amazing to see the information that is getting out there
Sure.
for people.
It happens to be the case that the popularization of plant medicines happens without the billions of dollars of promotional money that the pharmaceutical companies spend. You take something, it helps you to get to sleep because you've had trouble getting to sleep, let's say. You tell your friends. Some friend of yours says, "Gosh, I have so much trouble getting to sleep. Maybe I'll try that." So they try ashwagandha, they try lemon balm, they try something. It works for them. They get a great night's sleep. They tell their friends. The popularization of these, while there is tremendous science behind them, largely happens as a result of grassroots conversation versus the many, many billions of dollars that the pharma companies spend on doctors' visits and promotional programs and TV advertising. That's not largely what our industry really does.
It's true. And so, going back to the indigenous people, which is something that you've done yourself, and listening to their stories and looking at the way of their life, how would you say they're dealing with stress and anxiety and depression, for example? Do they go to plant medicine, or do they just live different lives so that they don't necessarily have these type of issues?
Well, okay. I live in the United States. We consume more antidepressants, more anti anxiety medication, more mood modifying medications than all the rest of the world put together. We have a sick, crazy society, people nervous and upset about everything big and small, and they're gobbling drugs like M&Ms. My experience with indigenous people around the world, whether they're people in the Amazon rainforest, people in Congo, people in Vanuatu, people in the mountains of Thailand, is that if they have adequate food and shelter and safety and freedom, then they're just not as stressed as people in the so called developed areas are. They don't fret about the same things. They're much more relaxed. I mean, maybe they say, "Oh, I went out fishing today. It wasn't a good day. I didn't get that many fish." You know, but we manufacture as a result of competitive society and the urge to have more. We manufacture a lot of mood disorders for ourselves. So I think the latter thing that you mentioned, that they live differently, again, assuming that they have their basic needs met, you know, they don't need these things. I mean, the first time I ever went to Vanuatu, which was in 1995, I was on Pentecost Island, living there in a village with people, and I just saw a bunch of really joyful people who were very relaxed and strong and healthy and capable and fun to be around, and children who didn't hit each other and didn't throw tantrums and just seemed to have a good time with each other. And it was wonderful to see. And my experience with Native people around the world is that if they do have their basics met, they are much more free of mental and emotional disorders than we are in the so-called developed world.
Isn't that interesting? And so, going back to the discussion on ashwagandha, would you say that the experiences that you've had in India, where ashwagandha is made or is harvested, Is that a place where people are using ashwagandha in this way?
Well, they use I mean, women use ashwagandha for sexual and reproductive health. I have had a number of medical doctors in India basically say, no woman walks out of my office without ashwagandha because it's that good for helping to maintain healthy sexual and reproductive function. So not everybody's taking it for stress. Yeah, some people say, I take it because it gives me a better night's sleep, a more sound sleep. I don't wake up in the middle of the night. I go to sleep more easily. I think that in the United States and in Europe, people tend to utilize ashwagandha more for stress. I don't really see that same use as much in India. Ashwagandha is very, very widely used for energy and strength and endurance and stamina, for improved athletic performance, all of which are verified by modern human clinical science. Although, of course, those have been traditional uses for thousands of years. And I want to make a point here. People don't use something for thousands of years if it doesn't work. They don't have any incentive to do that. None at all. If it doesn't work, they move on. But I do think that the uses of ashwagandha are different, let's say, in India overall, than they are in the United States and Europe when we're frantic with stress.
Very interesting. Okay, let's talk about another very popular food, medicine, which is cacao. Now, I mean, we as women, let's talk about women's health. We tend to get stressed around our periods, or there's times when we're feeling low and we reach for chocolate, right? Yay, let's get to the cupboard. And sometimes we find ourselves having, if we're educated enough and conscious, we are finding ourselves having those chocolate bars that are like 80% cacao because, we know how good it is for us. Could you elaborate on the potency behind cacao and the raw ingredients behind it as well?
Sure. Cacao, which yields what we know as cocoa beans, which are used to make chocolate. Cacao is one of the healthiest things you can possibly put in your body. It is more loaded with nutrition, with protective antioxidants, with anti inflammatory agents, with cardiovascular enhancing agents than any other food I know. No exceptions whatsoever, not one. I spent some time with the Kuna people in the San Blas Islands of Panama. They're very, very poor there. And what they have is cacao. So they make a beverage out of cacao. They actually take boiling water and they throw in bananas and they boil the bananas and then they mash them up. And then they add a huge amount of cocoa nibs, which are the insides of the cocoa beans that come from the pod, which is called the cacao pod. And with the final drink is very thick. It's almost like gravy. And that is their primary food. And Harvard University and other medical centers have been studying these people for decades now because they have no incidence at all of heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, and 16 common forms of cancer. So, and that is due to the unusual flavonols and phenols and other protective compounds in cacao. For women who are craving chocolate when they experience a change in mood around the time of their periods, chocolate has profound mind and mood modifying properties. It contains dopamine, which is a compound that we manufacture in the brain that is very satisfying to us. Anything that gives us pleasure does so in part because our bodies produce dopamine around that. So, making love, we produce dopamine. Eating a good meal, we produce dopamine. Getting a great massage, we produce dopamine. So, as a mood modifier, chocolate is very, very good. And you mentioned something like having 75 or 80% cocoa solids, that's really what you want. Then you're getting a super concentration of the nutritional components of chocolate, say, versus milk chocolate, which may only have 20, cocoa in it. So it turns out that cacao, which produces cocoa beans that we use to make chocolate, is in fact one of the very absolute healthiest substance you could possibly put in your body. And I know that's good news. I know there are people right now going, really? I'm I'm going to go out and get some dark chocolate. And yeah, go out and get some dark chocolate, please do.
And what are other ways that you see the cultures of these traditions using cacao?
Well, I mean, I've been in Ecuador where they've made a drink similar to what I saw in the San Blas Islands. Water, bananas, lots and lots and lots of cocoa nibs, all blended together and cooked and drunk, again, thick like gravy. I mean, mostly it's a very enjoyable thing for people. Um, in the Amazon, they'll take cacao and they'll make sort of cakes. And I don't mean cakes that you eat like with flour, but they'll make these hard cakes of the cocoa, and then they'll break off a hunk or take the whole thing and throw it into water. Or in the case of cooking in Mexico, they make mole, a sauce out of it. There, we are inventing what we like to call traditions around the ceremonial use of cacao, which really hasn't existed since the early Maya, since the Olmec. So some people actually, make a heavy duty chocolate, and they have some sort of a ceremony around it and shake rattles and do that kind of thing and burn incense and drink this stuff. And that's fine. But you really don't have to do that. You can just plain enjoy your chocolate as you wish.
Mm, very interesting. And so in your travels, in regards to, we're going deeper into the I guess the illness and the incidences of ill health that we see in the modern world, especially in the more, I would say, first world. Depression. Let's talk about what ways that the plant medicine world, we talk a lot about, yes, I went to do a journey or I went to do a plant medicine ceremony and I helped to understand more about my body. So, yes, thank you everyone for listening. I really enjoyed that talk. I hope you did too. And there will be more of these on the Food Matters podcast. So head to foodmatters.com and see you again.